Welcome back to another Buy or Sell WNBA Fantasy Edition. This is going to be part 1 of 2 for this week because we don't always have Monday games, but we do this week, so this is just going to be for the Monday, July 14th games. Later, I'll be putting out part 2 with buys and sells for Tuesday and Wednesday of this week, and then that's it for games because Saturday is All-Star Weekend in Indianapolis. Exciting stuff to be sure, but you'll have to check out someone else's video for that because there's no fantasy points in the All-Star game. Before we get going, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Before I get to my buys and sells for July 14th games, let's take a look at how I did with my picks from last week. Last week, I had 4 buys and 4 sells. The buys were Aziaha James, Rachel Bannum, Monique Billings, and Aneesa Morrow. Aziaha James had 24 combined fantasy points in a start, and then coming off the bench against the Fever on Sunday, she had 22 fantasy points as Arike Ogunbowale made her return and reclaimed their starting guard position. I think James showed on Sunday that she still has great potential, even if she's coming off the bench, because when she was in, Dallas was looking to get the ball into her hands. Rachel Bannum for the Chicago Sky had 20 points against Dallas on July 9th, and then 23 fantasy points against Minnesota. Bannum's finished with 11 and 12 points in those 2 games. She had 5 assists and 3 rebounds against the Lynx. And over the past 7 days, Bannum's averaging 25 fantasy points per game. That's 17th among guards over that stretch. Kim Cardoso made her return against Minnesota on Saturday, but it didn't affect Bannum, and I like her potential going forward. Monique Billings finished with just 19 fantasy points in 2 games, and my buy, a big dud. Janelle Salon started both of those games against the Fever and Aces, and just as I said, I thought Salon should be the power forward for Golden State. Well, looks like she might be. Aneesa Morrow for the Connecticut Sun had 3 matchups this past week, 15 fantasy points in her first against the Seattle Storm, just 5 fantasy points against Seattle 2 days later, and she recovered with 19 fantasy points to end the week on Sunday at the LA Sparks. Morrow's 5-point performance can be chalked up to rookie. Morrow missed a few assignments against Seattle and was pulled early and ended up with just 11 minutes. She played 22 minutes on Sunday at LA, 10 points, 7 rebounds, a block was the result. We continue to monitor Aneesa Morrow and Olivia Nelson-Odota's situation with Connecticut. Nelson-Odota struggled on Sunday in 24 minutes, just 4 points and 3 rebounds and 4 turnovers. I sold Sami Whitcomb, but my video came out Tuesday after her 50-plus point performance, so this was for her July 9th game against the Minnesota Lynx. Whitcomb finished with 25 fantasy points, despite going 0 for 3 from the 3-point line. Her performance was saved with 2 stocks, 1 steal, and 1 block, and 6 assists and 5 rebounds, all of them defensive. The Mercury play again on Monday. Satou, Sabally, and Kahleah have already been ruled out for Phoenix's next game, so you better believe we'll be talking about Whitcomb more a little bit later. Teme Fagbenle for the Golden State Valkyries was a sell for me last week. She finished with 19 points against the Aces on Saturday, a little better than her 16 fantasy points against the Fever earlier in the week. We'll talk more about the Golden State Valkyries front court later, but Fagbenle remains a sell for me because at 40% owned, I still think there's more predictable options out there. She's a hustle player, which is great on the night you get points from her, but can be awful disappointing on the nights her plays go unnoticed in the fantasy column. Also a sell was Elizabeth Williams for the Chicago Sky, owned in almost 60% of leagues. In the 2 games since Kamilla Cardoso returned for the Sky, Williams had 19 fantasy points against the Dallas Wings, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, and 8 points in 22 minutes, but saw just 12 minutes of court time in the Sky's last game against the Minnesota Lynx. Like I said last week, Williams looks great this year, and she still managed 8 points and 2 assists in the 12 minutes. Williams isn't going to get the opportunities, but if there's an injury, she immediately becomes a must-add. And finally, Arie McDonald was a sell with the return of Caitlin Clark. McDonald scored 12 points in a start versus the Dream on the 11th, and on the 13th finished with 21 points off the bench versus the Dallas Wings. With Clark back and healthy, starting or off the bench, no change in my opinion. McDonald droppable unless Clark gets hurt again. Now let's move on to this week's buys and sells. We're only focusing on the July 14th games in this part 1. In part 2, we'll take a look at games happening on the 15th and 16th. Those games, the Minnesota Lynx at the Chicago Sky and the Phoenix Mercury at the Golden State Valkyries. For Minnesota-Chicago, I've got 1 buy and 2 sells. The buy, again, Rachel Banham. And folks, if you need a guard and Banham is available, then guess what? You don't need a guard. You just need to add her to your roster. She's available in over 92% of ESPN leagues. She's averaging 25 fantasy points per game over the past 7 days. That's 17th among guards. Somehow her teammate Haley Van Lith is still owned in almost 17% of leagues, despite the fact she didn't even play in Saturday's game and hasn't even logged 20 minutes of total playing time across the last 4 Chicago Sky games. If you're a Van Lith owner, drop her and add Banham. It's just that simple. Banham's just getting comfortable with the Sky, and I think she's going to settle in as a starter for the rest of the year. Also for the Chicago Sky, sell Elizabeth Williams. She was a sell last week. I'm just reiterating that despite being owned in almost 60% of leagues, Williams is a streamer right now at best. And even though she's having a great individual season on the court, the statistics don't show it because she's just not getting enough time. For the Minnesota Lynx, sell Jessica Shepard. Shepard produces if she gets minutes, but they aren't there. She hasn't crossed 20 minutes played since her 12-point, 10-rebound, 10-assist game against Golden State on July 5th. She came off the bench in that one and played most of the second half. Your best hope here is a flyer on her if you think this game is a blowout against the Sky, but other than that, if you stream Shepard, don't expect much. And for the late game, the Phoenix Mercury at the Golden State Valkyries, I've got a buy for Tiffany Hayes. Somehow Hayes is under 70% owned, not available in my league, but if she's available in yours, get her. She's averaging nearly 3 3-pointers per over the last 5 games, and she's going to continue to find open threes in the spread out Valkyries offense. It's simple. Get Hayes on your team if she's somehow still available. And we mentioned her earlier, but again, from a sell to a buy, it's Sami Whitcomb, as Satou, Sabally, and Kahleah have both been ruled out for Monday, so the Mercury will need offense. That's been Whitcomb lately. My sell last week was based on this. She was getting a ton of offense thrown her way with the injuries, and I thought we were due for the Mercury to get healthy. That's not the case yet, so we reassessed. The Valkyries allow nearly 28 3-point attempts per game. That's the second most in the WNBA. So while Golden State allows the second fewest points, I think Whitcomb has decent potential to get hot from 3 and rack up the points. A sell for Kahleah Thornton. You're starting her if you don't have another option, no doubt. But if you are deciding between another forward or utility player or Kahleah Thornton versus Phoenix, I think she might be due for a down game. This is the Valkyries' third matchup with the Mercury. She had 17 ESPN standard fantasy points on the June 5th matchup and 29 fantasy points in the May 11th matchup. Thornton has just 8 combined rebounds in those games and shot just 3 of 11 from 3. In their July 9th win, Phoenix held Minnesota to just 26% shooting from beyond the arc. Might be an off night for Kahleah. And finally, I guess a hold for the Golden State Valkyries front court. It looks like again Janelle Salon, as I thought she should be, is taking the reins of that power forward position. She started the last 2 games, looked really good on Saturday. 27 ESPN standard fantasy points on 16 points and 6 rebounds. I have Salon re-added in my league, but with hesitancy. Don't forget about Chechi Zandalicini either. She scored 12 points in 18 minutes off the bench in Saturday's loss to the Aces. She's worth monitoring, as is the pecking order for this whole Valkyries front court. And that's it for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 when we take a look at the rest of the week's matchups. Don't forget to subscribe and have a great day.